I'm a man who believed that I died 20 years ago, and I live like a man who is dead already. I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Gary Webb. I am an investigative journalist, and in 1996 I wrote a series of stories entitled Dark Alliance, which was about CIA involvement in drug trafficking.
I knew a man who once said death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back.
We've opened Skull and Bone, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go
I'm
wild.
sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the rest.
Number 322.
I have duty to report this afternoon that my friend and colleague, Tim Russert, collapsed and died early this afternoon.
I may die in this cell tonight or in the arena tomorrow. I am a slave. What possible difference can I make?
And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Hello and welcome back to your favorite live weekly call-in conspiracy or parapolitical show, if you want to dress it up a little bit, digging into another week in the wide world of schizophrenia. As always, joined by Austin Picard, ready to dig into it with you already deadheads. And just a casual reminder, this is a call-in show. We will have the lines open here soon. We'll remind you guys the number when the time comes, so you guys can get involved in the show. Also, for the non-pollers, you can contribute. You can be part of the show, the second half of the show, as we typically do here. But as always, we wind Austin up with some schizophrenia and get him going, get the Austinism flowing, and very much doing the same this week. I think we're going to dig a little bit into who would have thought, but some child trafficking rings. That's what we're going to start off with today. Before we jump into that, though, Austin, how has your week been? I think you and I just realized you and Jacob did a show the other day. I believe it was over on his channel. So I don't know if you guys dual streamed it, but definitely go check out Jacob's show, Rise to Liberty. I'm assuming you guys also talked about child trafficking there?
Unfortunately, yes. We did. And really, I think the goal was to obviously discuss the Odyssey Foundation more in the scope, through the scope of the Delta Project after the rebrand into Chicago. But obviously, I derailed the conversation with talk of ritualistic pagan human sacrifice and things of that nature, and forced a brief film breakdown on Jacob as well. So it's been unfortunate. Honestly, it's not been unfortunate. It's probably something that I need to do occasionally, because there is value in breaking down and interpreting pop culture reference points, obviously. And I
think you should do specific videos. And I've been saying that for a while. People like that. That's something that'll hit the algo. I know it might be hard for you to format correctly. I think you should probably do it more of a format of just kind of spilling it instead of trying to overly prepare it, but maybe not quite a full-on rambling stream, but just kind of talk about a film, your thoughts on it, yada yada. I think that would do well. But yes, I guess you got to get it off your chest here every now and then.
It's necessary. And really, I think it's also a way that I can kind of like decompress from, as much as it's not at all really a way to decompress, it from what we study and investigate on a daily basis in terms of these cases. It really is just more proof positive that helps reinforce that this is unfortunately the reality we face, and And we've been inundated with this kind of pop culture, weaponized version of pop culture, I should say, like it's just oversaturated with these occult, ancient pagan principles. And I think it's very much perverted modern society and just reality in general into this sort of inverted moral landscape that we've kind of referenced it as, and given it its own title. So, oh shit, it's Hey Say What Now in the chat. What's up, buddy? It's been a while since I actually saw him, but yeah, honestly, I appreciate you guys, and mainly it's just something that I have to do. I think for just because, for one, again, we had like the Christopher Lee connection to the film itself. I won't necessarily get into it right now because obviously I'm kind of burying the lead for a moment, just because I think it's really, I just wanted to mention the fact that we discussed that on the episode, and it was I kind of had thoughts after the fact, like more conclusive thoughts after the conversation that we had. And so I made some notes, just like I wrote down like basically a full page of what I was thinking about and how I should have really kind of like contextualized my thoughts and the interpretation of the film. And but also I think we definitely came to a very similar conclusion. It's just I didn't necessarily illustrate it in the best way possible. But the point being is it was another just exciting and I think a relevance and crucial conversation to have, as dark and sinister as these cases truly are. And unfortunately, it's like how much I've now kind of resorted to utilizing pop culture as a decompression point, from my own internal thought process. It's like it's still very difficult because you realize how much this revelation of the method and this layered occultism and symbolism and things of that nature are just fraught all throughout these various plot points and again cultural touchstones, as we've been referring to them as. But anyway, so yeah, we really kind of honed in on a little bit of John Wayne Gacy as well, a little more, and I felt as if that's always a very critical conversation, because again, how many people are truly aware of the fact that these serial killers, for the most part, at least almost every single one we can point to, effectively aren't what they seem, and are assuredly not in whatsoever what we've been led to believe by the official narrative and obviously the authorities' official version of events. But yeah, so here we are again, bogged down in these child sex trafficking networks, because unfortunately they are just as relevant now than they were when the cases went public. Mainly because the very same individuals, prominent personalities, it might be a step removed, let's just say, from the original case or whatever the context would be, but still very much implicated in so many of these networks that it's almost impossible to imagine a world where the top currency in DC isn't sexual blackmail, and that probably applies internationally, to all of these international governments. So
I mean, to that point, I did want to take a little bit of a detour into something. I covered it a little bit on the morning of this show, or morning on the morning show. But this is something that weirdly is echoing something of the past that still seems to have relevance today, and is echoing into today. There's this weird kind of this through line between the Kirk story of today, the Kirk killing, and oddly enough, the Elm guest house thing. And when you're kind of looking at this, like these periphery characters involved in these shady sort of things, we've talked quite a bit about who's his old Count Chocula. What the hell is his name? Well, I can't think of his name.
Mappin, is that who you're talking
no,
about?
Count Chocula, the eyebrows.
Oh, Michael Aquino.
Kino, yeah, there you go, Kino. His essentially his military go-to guy, Colonel Vallely, the co-writer of Mind War, is one of the people on the board of TPUSA, and then over in the UK chapter, the big dog over there, essentially the main driving force behind that, essentially helped them get it off the ground. They brag about it quite frequently. Is John Mappin, who also incidentally is one of the most renowned financial donors of Scientology in that region over in the UK. So he is this big Scientology guy. Now, I'm sure me and you have probably talked in passing before about how this guy was actually in the Black Book. So this has been brought up before. So that's of significance, but it's not necessarily too much significant, or not too significant. All that means is that you rose to the level of proximity and importance to Jeffrey Epstein to merit essentially being an address in some address book, or having some sort of address, phone, something of the like. So that's all that means. It's not necessarily damning. I don't recall if there were any sort of demarcations in it, because a lot of times it's brought up this one was circled, that one was underlined. But either way, he is in there. But apparently he's also in the Epstein files. Now, caveat, bear in mind this is essentially the equivalent of a tip line that we're kind of getting the inside line from the FBI. But it still is interesting, and it is perfectly plausible when you understand the deal with Mappin. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm just far too jaded and too schizophrenic when it comes to Scientology, but I don't know. I struggle to believe this guy is just, hunky-dory good guy. He's here for truth and everything, and there's no other thing going on here. With somebody like that. I don't know. I've dug too deep into some of the rabbit holes of Scientology, its connections to the Process Church, and the like, and also seen how much it creepily kind of ties into the halls of power, to where you're like, what the fuck is going on here? Like, there's just like interconnected, essentially, I don't know, maybe market of cults, the supranational, entity that it's just like a patchwork of cults that essentially rule above us, it seems. But anyways, he was in the Epstein files. And I just thought it was in regards to the I believe in reference to Operation Orchid, which was a law enforcement
investigation that was basically
it was going after the Dirty Dozen.
It was established in '89, and basically this directly was now in relation to these former cases. I believe specifically the disappearance of and murder of Mark Tidesley or something was the name of the boy,
yes,
the young boy, I believe.
I think.
Okay, Tildesley.
It was a weird name.
So basically, I believe the operation inevitably, ultimately revealed that Tildesley was abducted specifically by a group of pedophiles, a gang of pedophiles, right? That was allegedly led by this Sidney Cook, which directly ties into the Elm Guest House affair, obviously, which took place in the 70s. Was a major public scandal that's been ultimately deemed a hoax, which is absolutely ridiculous. If you look into the investigation, you understand how this was very much effectively covered up, I think, because of the high profile political figures involved and implicated in the network, which is it's directly what. Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just want to make sure people were aware of Operation Orchid, right?
Yeah. I think it was something like a dozen or so children, I believe, that went dead, I believe, as a result of the Dirty Dozen that they were going after, and this being tied into the Elm Guest House, which is also renowned. It's just these all things are sort of tied in together. But either way, I do have this audio clip that we're going to play right here. I kind of botched my presentation of it this morning, but it's all ready to go today. But I do want to let you guys know the phone lines are open, 1-833-722-3323, 1-833-722-DEAD. You can call in and join the conversation, ask us some questions, whatever it is. But yeah, let's watch this clip, and then I kind of want to pick your brain a little bit. See what you think. Now, bear in mind, I'm not trying to be the Candace show here. I do want to be very clear. This is just some dude who called into the FBI with some tip. Who knows? Maybe he's a guy with an axe to grind. Maybe this is some op in and of itself. It would be super easy to just cast aspersions as somebody, But anyways, let's go and play it.
My name's I'm calling from London, UK, and I've been put through to your number, sir, by by the switchboard and another person. Is it possible, if you can, to give me a call back? It's about an entry in Jeffrey Epstein's contact book, the 97-page one, a chap called John Mappin. I deal with whistleblowers and charities over here for a number of years regarding child sexual abuse. I've been following this very closely, have been heavily involved. I'm not a police officer. Basically, this man has been identified back in 1989 to a police operation here in the Met called Operation Orchid. If it is the same John Mappin, if you want to give me a ring back, my UK mobile number is... the Met didn't act on it, like they didn't act on a lot of things regarding child sexual abuse. It specifically involves a ring called the baby sitting ring. I'll let you draw your own conclusions to that. It's pretty horrific. The detail I've been given by the retired charity worker who had meetings at New Scotland Yard, unreceptive meetings to the details they were giving. Thanks very much. It's UK time. I'm in mid-afternoon, and it is the 31st of August. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
All right. I can. By the way, I do also have a transcript of that from Dana's thing if you want to read it to give a little more clarification. But kind of give a specific. Now, as I said, this doesn't give a ton of information here, so there's not a ton of us to work with. He does name drop Mappin here, so that's significant. Essentially asking a callback, an entry in Epstein's contact book. So he makes a reference to essentially the black book that we've mentioned before. He says, I deal with whistleblowers and charities. I've been following this closely. A police officer. He says, basically, this man's been identified back in 1989 to a police operation here in the Met called Operation Orchid. It is the same John Mappin. He says, if it is the same John Mappin, if you want to give me a ring. So even he said it like if. So I guess there's some level of, it could be somebody else. But yeah, he said that this is called the babysitting ring is the name of the ring. That doesn't ring a bell for me. I don't know if it does for you, Austin. Maybe it was more hyper specific to whatever that operation. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on all this, Austin?
Man, honestly, I think this is really, it's hard to obviously hinge a sort of any kind of conclusive evidence of any kind, right, on this specific reference, direct reference. I would say it's suspect. I'm a little skeptical just because it is now on the connection itself, not whatsoever. But I feel as if. I feel like there might be legs to that, absolutely. But I also think that we have to be very careful about who we put any real stock into in terms of legitimate credibility and just knowing how much the Epstein files specifically have been injected with misinformation, specifically I think to disseminate throughout this industry, throughout this sort of space of content creation and content creators and people who are attempting to actually get to the root cause of things. And I was teasing Candace, but she's basically doing the same thing. I mean, in a certain sense, what she's doing with the Tyler Robinson case, in a certain way, is kind of like the Epstein files. I mean, I guess some people could spin it as a positive way. But a lot of the Epstein files dump was a trove of a lot of tip lines sort of stuff. So not everything's actually that valuable. There's a lot of valuable shit in there. So maybe it's not the greatest equivalent. It's actually worse. It's almost like she's dumping almost nothing exclusively but the bullshit. But I was covering today one of her things. I don't know how I didn't realize this now. Apparently, she does have a tip line, which totally makes sense. But a lot of these things she's run with are literally just tips. Nothing's been she might allude to some sort of verification, but it's just somebody said something, which that's fine. Right. But you got to kind of throw it out that way and not in this salacious all of the, because I think I was one of the claims, I think it was that the hospital that Charlie Kirk went to, essentially the claim was that before even the shooting occurred, the hospital had been emptied or whatever ahead of time for some unknown reason. And that's entirely, she covered it a whole
5-minute thing on it, and the only thing is a trust me bro from an anonymous tip line in her thing, which is like fine. And to be fair, she does kind of end it. I don't know if she explicitly says that, but you heavily get that from context, and it ends with reminding you everybody that I have a tip line. So it's like very much like, oh, this is one of you guys just giving me a tip. Like, I have a tip. So, which is, like I said, fine, but I do think the way it's presented, it kind of makes people think like, oh my god. And you're like, okay, but whoa, like, okay, but what are we basing this on? Like,
Right.
There's just too much of people getting way ahead of themselves over like some fucking anonymous source.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and honestly, what's frustrating to me is that I think the disingenuous presentation is by design to effectively damage the credibility of anyone who will parrot these talking points. And I think, especially without doing their due diligence and at the very least presenting it in the way that we just did, right? And to where you kind of, and in no way am I concerned with I guess optics matter, obviously, just to remain credible in the minds of to anyone who you're trying to have an objective conversation with. But at the same time, it's like if that's your only priority, I'm just as skeptical of who you are as a public personality than ever. And so anyway, I just feel like we have to remain in that karate stance as always, right? In terms of these especially these more privileged personalities on the algorithm, especially, right? And that's always seemingly an influence operation, right? And it's always this kind of deliberate and malevolent deception playing out. And that's always what I've specifically viewed Candace as. But I will say, I mean, it's very clear and obvious that John Mappin's listed in the Black Book. I think it's like page 35. He's got 2 phone numbers and even an address in the UK. And it's just like, there's no debate whatsoever in that. And I will say that looking through like basically the evidence provided in the investigation of Operation Orchid, what is alleged to have been a debunking of the direct connection to John Mappin to the operation, who knows if this is a legitimate fact in terms of has it truly been debunked? Now, I will say that I'm looking through essentially these summaries and investigative summaries and executive summaries from the documents themselves that basically are suggesting that there's no direct evidence connecting John Mappin to Operation Orchid. Unfortunately, this may potentially stem, and according to the investigators, from confusion, name confusion, with basically other investigations online. Now, I'm not trying to dismiss this connection in any way whatsoever. Believe me, if anything, I would almost inherently believe like it's almost my bias that I would accept at face value that of course John Mappin would be connected to Operation Orchid, right? But anyway, that's the only reason that I kind of think
it's a credibility thing.
Yeah,
it's like one thing I brought up this morning that I was kind of irritated with. Someone gave there was who is it? I forget his name. He's one of those yelly in truck guys. He was kind of known for being kind of sort of attractive dude that the gays and the ladies clearly like to see him yell in his truck, and he's kind of always on the front of Rumble. But he got into it with and he's very much kind of goy slop sort of thing. He was one of those influencers who actually went to go work for the DOW during all of that shit. I think he technically got fired. I don't know why I can't think of his name. I've covered shit about whether this guy is like Graham something. I don't know, whatever. Either way, it'll come back to me later, but it's kind of beside the point. But they got into it. And he essentially said kind of what I just said, which funny enough, I've pointed out before Shapiro said similar such things, and some of these times, and I fucking not a big fan of Shapiro, but Candace does a good job of making them seem like rational people. For example, he was kind of saying something along those lines, and instead of responding to that point, she made this like weird sort of schizo allusion to him maybe being gay or being a swinger, which like I don't know if he is or not, but like even like these sort of proof she gave was some weird Facebook post that like, what? How am I supposed to get this from that? And it's just this is just a sloppy bullshit, which it's like, sure, you can have fun and dunk on people, but it's like even the dunk didn't even make sense. It came off as like shitty logic, like shoddily source, like even for this like salacious like dunking, you know what I mean? Like, and at the very least, you think you would at least be, even if you do want to get a dunk in, you at least would the same time tackle the actual logical, crux of the issue, like, or whatever. But no, and so this has kind of just become this like close common denominator. Kind of look like the ladies are arguing, kind of this like gay little cat fight. And it just becomes this weird sideshow that people don't take seriously as well. They probably kind of shouldn't, some of these people. And I totally get the inclination from a lot of these people just to kind of be like, be grossed out by these people. And they're going to manipulate that.
Yeah, and how many like unstable minds and just not necessarily even people who are like controlled assets that can be manipulated into making false statements and things of that nature. It's like, I'm just curious, it's like we always have to consider the idea and the concept. And I do think this is, I've never really the Epstein files are kind of, I think, the most relevant example of this in throughout my lifetime personally, just seeing a deliberate injection of misinformation, and it felt as if that was all based on these kind of hotline tips to the FBI that were being made public by all of these prominent personalities in the algorithm and things of that nature to kind of control the threads of evidence that were being publicly made available. And I think all of that is it's just an influence operation that is intended to clearly compromise your not only your credibility, but the sort of your interpretation and internalization of the information in itself. And so if you have this, and I think it's very important for people to always check their bias, remind themselves, how much they could easily be led astray by something they want to unfortunately be the case, or and I think that leaves a lot of people vulnerable psychologically, and that is where I think the propaganda is so effective. And so in terms of Operation Orchid, though, I'm glad we have a reason to discuss it, because once again, it's like how many people are unaware of the Elm Guest House affair and this vast network of pedophiles that implicate such prominent figures in the political, even the aristocracy in the UK. But beyond that, how it unfortunately it extends to the West, right? Obviously, and this very network is just as much relevant, and I believe, obviously, sort of represented, directly represented. This very network of the Elm Guest House affair has been directly represented in the U.S. domestically. And so I think that understanding that this network has direct connections essentially to really the Odyssey Foundation, right? And John David Norman and this underground, this very well systematically entrenched pedophile underground that we've discussed so very often in the past through so many different evidentiary windows and connecting points that really kind of like prove positive and reinforce the credibility of these connections. And so it was the abduction and murder of the unfortunate young soul Mark Tittlesley, right? I believe is how you pronounce it, right? That basically that happened essentially through the Operation Orchid investigation. It was later revealed, right, that basically the night he disappeared, Tittlesley was abducted, drugged, tortured, and raped to death, right, is basically what unfortunately occurred. And this all happened in regard to not only Sidney Cook being directly involved in this unfortunate, what was the reference? The Dirty Dozen, I believe, is what they were called, right? And I think Les Bailey was one of the other perpetrators who was charged for murder. Like by 1991, he was charged for murder and given 2 life sentences, and then inevitably pled guilty. But what I found interesting is that ultimately, the following year, he's murdered in prison. So by 1993, you have a perpetrator who was actually given 2 life sentences. One of the only perpetrators who was basically sentenced and pled guilty to manslaughter, inevitably was murdered in prison the following year, essentially within 2 years. So I think that is important for people to be aware of, and I don't think that was an accident, right? It very much seemed, as much as even David Berkowitz getting his throat slashed, it's like, just as he's being as vocal as he was, right? And then goes radio silent. I mean, when he was asked why, he said clearly it was to protect the only remaining family he had left, and that was basically his father, who would even consider having a relationship with him or maintaining a relationship with him after everything went public, and clearly his involvement in the murders and the process church of the final judgment, right? Obviously, but anyway, the point is that unfortunately the Elm Guest House affair was ultimately deemed a hoax, as I said earlier, right? And this is really like, it's all transpiring within the 70s, right? Just considering the time period and the chronological order of things, and so you have basically these prominent figures in the British aristocracy, and also just basically, well, they're all alleged essentially to have engaged in this sexual abuse and child grooming, right? And this is all happening at a guest house in the late 70s and early 80s. And so what's interesting to me is that there's a statement that's made later on, because there's a reinvestigation. They reopen the case, and that happens later on in 2012, like much, decades later, after the original case was made public, right? And the entire scandal occurred. You have a new operation that was basically an investigation that was launched called Operation Fairbanks, I believe is what it was called. But either way, the fact that essentially there were statements made by the House of Commons that regarded this direct connection to the Elm Guest House affair, that this was directly involved with a pedophile network that was active at the time and brought children to parties at private residences, to these prominent figures. And so this is like leading politicians of the period, basically, that were being accused in the press. And so what happened is you had a retired magistrate, right? And this was Vishimbar Mehrotra or something. And I can't really, I'm not entirely certain how to pronounce his name, but his son Vishal had basically disappeared within a mile of the Elm Guest House, and that happened in the early 80s, right? So late 70s, this was all kind of being made public, and then in the early 80s, it was around 1981, that basically he'd been contacted shortly after his son's disappearance, this retired magistrate, and basically, this is he had been contacted by a male prostitute who said his son may have been taken to the Elm Guest House and murdered by a group of highly placed pedophiles. That was his quote. And so the father then basically said he relays this information to the authorities at the time, but they refused to even thoroughly investigate this whatsoever. And he went on the record making this statement. And I encourage everyone basically to also look into this case personally, because it's and it will be included in a solo project in the future, because once again, it's like understanding how much this overlaps with other cases we've covered in the past. It's basically impossible not to mention the relevant nature of this case. And but the point being is that basically, I believe it was the father making a statement to the, I think it was what he called a Westminster pedophile ring, is what essentially the police went on the record. The father went on the record with the police claiming that basically the investigators helped thoroughly cover up this Westminster pedophile ring. And so that all basically was acknowledged by the year 2014, which is interesting in itself, right? That it took so long, took so many years for this acknowledgement to even been made. But he says directly, he said he was contacted by a young man who seemed to be in his 20s. He told me he believed Vishal may have been taken by pedophiles in the Elm Guest House near Barnes Common. He said there were highly placed people there. He talked about judges, politicians who were abusing little boys. So again, it's like how many, you know, how many just sort of examples of this, right? Do we honestly need until we thoroughly internalize the reality, right? That unfortunately the political aristocracy and this sort of permanent establishment class of aristocrats and unelected officials as well, and bureaucrats, I think they're, as I said and have been kind of repeating recently, this is the reason why I believe that you have essentially covert, esoteric, occult ideologies permeating all throughout modern society, right? Because, and again, covertly permeating all throughout modern society. And I think it's important because this is exactly what these individuals practice. It's not only sadism. I believe this is a level of occultism, and that they have essentially justified the sadistic nature of their ideology and what they practice on a daily basis, even in the form of their abuse. So to imagine a world where you can legitimately justify ritual murder in within your own core ideological framework, and that changes your relationship with death, that changes sort of how you even internalize what, sort of the finality of death, right? And so I think it distorts that relationship, but I think it also by design inverts it's an inversion of morality as well. And I think that is all sort of drenched within the modern ideological framework of of pagan practices. And so I do think ancient paganism is still very much practiced in modern society, and people have romanticized these concepts and kind of misidentified and misinterpreted them and misunderstood them and also misrepresented them. And I think to be the sort of new age concept that no longer applies to the old gods and the old way of life in which they originally practiced the rituals in the first place. But this is why I believe that they have psychologically justified many of these sadistic perpetrators have to some degree or another have legitimately justified this morally in terms of the sadism that they engage in. And so, it's important just to realize that this is nothing new. The current Epstein class is just an extension of what was the Elm Guest House affair and the Marc Dutroux affair. And I mean, what else can we point to until people begin to realize that the Kincora scandal was the exact same thing as the Elm Guest House? I mean, it's just like the geographical reference point is the only difference. And in reality, we have a permanent establishment of pedophiles, right, that are deciding our fate and ultimately becoming the extraordinary threat that we should prioritize, right? And I think that until that moment comes, and until we become willing to acknowledge that fact, then we will consistently facilitate the very core structured system and power paradigm that allows them to be essentially held from accountability, isolated and insulated from that accountability, which obviously justice is in what utopian society could you imagine a justice actually taking place in terms of being served to these perverted perpetrators? That seems to be a utopian right sort of it just, to me personally, I think people need to be far more aware of the fact that this is all very currently relevant in the moment, and in no way have these people veered from their ideology. I think they've only consistently there's a level of deception now that wasn't, it was a little bit more overtly practiced in the past, I think, and they sort of learned from that mistake, and now it's led us into this current moment where people are inherently embracing and internalizing these ideas, whether they're subconsciously taking root or not. They are perverting their own reality. And so here we are within, the inverted moral landscape, fear and loathing in modern Babylon. Once again, this is the case. And so anyway.
Speaking of inversion, magic, monsters, and relevant things of today, We weren't actually planning on talking about this, but I was kind of digging through some of my bookmarks. Like, oh, perfect time to talk about this. This is kind of perfect for this vein of thing. I don't think me and you have talked about. I'm not sure when this happened exactly. I don't know if it was after last week's Already Dead, but we had the recent Fauci went back before Congress. And fifth, over and over again, like in the most ridiculous sort of way. And which many may remember, a big deal about Fauci was that he got pardoned by Biden on the way out. And so then there became this whole thing of like, everyone was all fucking pissy whenever he got, and rightfully so. Like, what the fuck? This guy's getting a pardon. He's going to escape justice. But then many people pointed out well, hey, there's a silver lining to this. Yes, he may not receive justice, but we may receive some understanding instead, because now he's no longer able to plead the fifth, because he has the whole idea of pleading the fifth is because it prevents you from incriminating yourself. And if you have been deemed to be pardoned of a crime, you can't incriminate yourself of said crime. So it would totally make sense. But we've talked about on this show in the past, there was a whole lot of, I forget the specifics of how he went about it and to the degree of how official it was. But Trump made a whole big stink about all these pardons on the way out and how they aren't legit and he's not going to honor them. And I remember mentioning at the time that was significant, because essentially it kind of put it in this almost like Schrodinger's pardon sort of territory, to where essentially it gets the worst of both. And we saw that happen in real time. And I actually even kind of called it out. We saw him pleading the fifth. We even saw I played on my show clips of Rand Paul saying like, well, okay, well, then the next step is going to be that we're going to find some sort of appropriate legal measure to apply to you because you are, actively disregarding and you shouldn't be able to plead the fifth. But the point I made is he has one of the best legal arguments in the world. One of the people who holds the highest office in the land has highly signaled that he does not consider that to be legit. And the problem with things like pardons is it's kind of not that legit. We had this issue too when we had the declassification of files. If you remember, like, Trump got in trouble for that. And if you really get in the weeds, and if it goes like, well, technically presidents are allowed to declassify files, that's within their powers, and it's like, but there's not even technically like an actual, so like the president can deem something declassified, and there's not technically like a official process declared somewhere, so he can kind of just in his head say it's declassified and declassify it. Similar sort of thing here in a certain sort of sense. It's not as it's essentially very much a legal quagmire. This opens up a whole quandary, and so this opens up a whole separate legal issue of like, can he even plead the fifth? And now you're in this whole other paradigm of litigating whether he can even plead the fifth, and all because Trump opened his fucking mouth. And there was a chance that maybe if Trump just shut the fuck up, but I find it funny. Apparently Trump has actually decided now that he will respect the pardon after having given Fauci, after Fauci's display is when he then decided, after Fauci went to Congress, pled the fifth, having that, ace legal argument. Now that that's over, Trump is now saying he will respect the pardon, which funny enough is also going to allow him to later more efficaciously pardon his own people that surrounding him, and not have to have a political lump of sorts. So I just found that particularly interesting, that shortly after all of that, we have Trump now he is honoring it. So it's kind of like, why did we even have this weird now like legal quagmire? All to in the end go, oh, I honor it anyways. But here's the clip. I haven't watched it yet. I don't know if maybe we have much more to glean out of it, but here you go.
Well, the only thing you can really think about is the autopen, because the most powerful thing the president has, they say, is the power of pardon. So he was pardoned by Biden, and I respect that. I know how powerful it is. It's a very powerful, they say it's literally the most powerful thing a president has. Now, whether or not I signed my things directly, always, almost everything I sign directly. You're witness to many of them. He signed very few. The only thing I know that he signed was Hunter Biden's pardon, but I'm not sure that he signed, he probably didn't sign this one. So I can't tell you what the law is. I've heard that you have to have a lot of proof. You need to have letters. You need to have all sorts of things that the person operating the auto pen has to know exactly what it's all about. He didn't know what it was about because I saw him testify. So maybe there's something on the auto pen. Other than that, the power of pardon is very powerful.
It's okay. What do you think of all that, Austin? I know a lot there, but I just find it interesting. This weird. I mean, I guess it's been an ongoing theme and even more of a ridiculous thing. I mean, it made people. This is more of a theory show when I started, more anarchist, liberty, but it's absolutely ridiculous to an almost absurd parody level degree as of late. There's been many political going-ons that we could point to. The Iran war that's already been dictated to be unconstitutional multiple times by Congress now, yet they're still passing through their budgets and endorsing the military for the next year. So we've just ended up in this clown world sort of territory where all of these supposed ideas of what government are just completely in the most naked way not the truth, and all the things that you're told about in like Fuck the Government 101 are like goddamn neon signs right now. And I just feel like this is kind of another one, if you can kind of just think a little bit above just surface level of how these things play out and kind of how they cover their asses. I don't know. What are your thoughts? I just think it's almost kind of you guys just fell for it again, guys.
Yeah, it's just again proof positive that the partisan pendulum swing is all deceptive and by design to effectively sort of neuter the opposition. Because again, it's like I'm realizing in the current moment that we have this kind of aggressive opposition to the current administration that is in this kind of extraordinary over emotional reactive state of mind, and that is also by design. And so we will inevitably endure the consequences of this current administration with, I believe, an aggressively sort of progressive kind of permanent establishment version of the left's Trump, right? Essentially will inevitably take place. So I'm just always seeing that, once again, reinforcing evidence that there's a reason Fauci never quit when under Trump, right? And Trump never fired him, and he's evoking what I believe he pled like 111 times. He pled the fifth, I think it was. Now, obviously you have people defending this by saying
Trump
it's a sound
still defends warp
strategy.
speed, anything related to his time in there.
Absolutely.
You will never hear him say a negative word about anything to do with that at all. Man. And all it is obfuscating responsibility. Maybe he's sort of alluding to, how hard the blue governor shut down. And even then, though, he's not saying they shouldn't have shut down. It's just they shouldn't have shut down as hard. Like, it's just all nonsense. The idea, it really is just such a ridiculous fell for it again. It's just one of these things. The more you look back on the people who were like Trump, you're just like, Jesus. It was just all the signs were there. Like nothing, I mean, people just were wanting to believe things. Oh, he's anti-COVID or whatever, and you're like, no, or not anti-COVID. He's an anti-establishment when it comes to COVID. For some reason, MAGA tried to brand him with this. I don't know what there is in any way, shape, or form that actually gives anything to that idea, but yet they repeat it or try to behave as if that's the case over and over again. Now, I will say the MAGA influencer complex that falls in place below him, generally speaking, is anti-COVID, but it's almost like they just create this we'll just ignore that and we'll forget about that and just pretend like he's some COVID some freedom warrior in that way, as if he wasn't the architect of, and I guess I wouldn't say the architect of it all, but the enabler of it all, in many such ways. I mean, much of our, the chaos that is our market is due to the largest, injection into the market during his time there was something ridiculous. What was it, like 40% or something insane of the currency made in like one fucking year? It's ridiculous.
It's absurd. Yeah,
and it was under Trump. And it's going even higher and higher and higher. We started off, if you just look at the Department of War, before Trump came in, it was $500 million. The first budget you rolled in, they've already gone through $1 trillion, and now they're already pushing for 1.5, and fucking Hegseth's acting like it's gonna be the end of the world if he doesn't get it.
Yeah, no, I know, and this is just people. Obviously, the lockdowns were happening under Trump. I mean, this is the same concept of it takes a Republican to essentially pass the gun legislation. Right. It's like this is the same concept. And so people just need to remember this fact in terms of, oh, President Bumpstock is at it again, the most transparent administration in all of, American history. And in reality, it's just all the Epstein class perpetrators who are clearly implicated in the criminal enterprise that only prioritizes sexual blackmail. And this is just, for me, I don't know why anyone expects anything different. It's they're not paying attention, and they're certainly not internalizing this information and evidence that proves the fact that they do not have your best interest at heart, no matter who is in office in terms of the partisan political paradigm of this two-party paradigm. They will never be acting in your best interest, and they're certainly never acting in good faith. And I believe their entire goal in terms of the political class and what their role is to basically, provide damage control and the optics and also consistently influence the public by either generating conflict and escalating the culture war or getting out in front of what they already know will unfortunately, be the case in terms of what they have to beat back and condition out of the populace in terms of how they interpret this evidence and these propagandistic talking points or critical news information of the demoralizing news cycle. I mean, all of that is consistently being leveraged against us and by these personalities. So, but honestly, I did want to mention just before we take the break, just one last thing on Operation Orchid and also Fern Bridge, I believe was the other operation, because and everyone should go to Simon Dovey's website as well, because this case specifically is very well detailed in on his website, and it's fascinating, honestly, in terms of the cover up and the authorities being involved directly in the cover up, especially considering that in 2014, whenever all of this is basically reopened through Operation Fernbridge, you have detectives basically acknowledging finally the fact that this gang of murderous pedophiles was led by a man named Sidney Cook, allegedly, right, which had been looked at basically as suspects for the murder of that young boy that disappeared in 1981, the young boy that I had mentioned, who was the son of the retired magistrate. And what's interesting is that there was another young boy who had gone missing named Martin Allen, right? And he had also gone missing not far away from the Elm Guest House. And that would happen just about 2 years prior to that in 1979, instead of 81, where you had the magistrate's son disappearing. You had so basically this is when you have the boy's father basically had been the chief chauffeur of the Australian High Commissioner, Sir Gordon Freeth. So instantly the chauffeur connection that I've mentioned in the past in terms of Marion Petty and his brother being chauffeurs for five-star generals and things of that nature, right? And I believe Marion Petty's brother actually was murdered in a police. So I believe he was a police officer, and he was murdered on the job at one point. It's a very strange case. When I looked into it, it seemed interesting. But the point being is that there is this strange kind of resurfacing connection to these criminal networks, especially the child sex trafficking operations at the highest levels, being kind of facilitated through these various chauffeur enterprises and front company connections, which that came up in the context of the Marc Dutroux affair, right? They had a fleet of cars that they were utilizing in a chauffeur connection as well. And so this seems to have become some sort of playbook that they continue to utilize and I saw and recycle as
What
well.
was the name of that gang? Do you remember? It was like it was some French word, right?
Oh, the Dutroux gang.
Yeah. I was just, as you're mentioning, I was trying to brush up. I guess I shouldn't even have brought that up, but
It's
I was just
no,
saying.
it's
I almost said it was like Nouvelle or some weird French word. I forget. Yeah.
I mean, it's that's basically it. I mean, it's but they kind of man, the Dutroux affair obviously is just like whenever you see. Oh, and you know what else it reminded me of though is Jimmy Savile, right? When he was on that talk show and he mentioned basically taking that young child and putting the child in the boot of a car and then taking them to the royal palace.
Same to the queen. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially sneaking kids in into the palace. Like, okay.
Yeah, you snuck a child in to Buckingham Palace through the trunk of a car. But yeah. Anyway, so the point is that you have the individual father of Martin Allen, right? Was basically the chief chauffeur of the Australian High Commissioner, right? And that is interesting because again, Australia, right, has this direct connection to MK Ultra, very much so. And I think that in terms of like Anthony Kidman and this kind of disturbing form of like engaging in monarch mind control, torture, obviously it's sadistic kind of in terms of torture-based mind control is the main point that they were utilizing within Anthony Kidman's network as well. And I just feel like knowing how much monarch practices and sophisticated methods have been utilized over time, this seemed to have been happening within the context of this specific network as well. This is the reason why they were being tortured to death throughout the raping process. And it wasn't just, you know, a normal, I mean, obviously none of this is normal, but obviously it's not just this kind of straightforward session of abuse is the point I'm making. It's far more sinister and sadistic in nature. And again, these methods are very much relied upon in terms of the most sophisticated child trafficking networks that have existed over time that we can point to that have been publicly exposed. They all tend to utilize those most sinister forms of abuse. But either way, so you have essentially this chief chauffeur of the Australian High Commissioner. His name was Sir Gordon Freeth, and essentially the family that of this chief chauffeur, who was the father of Martin Allen, who had gone missing, this young boy who had gone missing, were actually living in the caretaker's cottage on the grounds of the High Commissioner residence. And so that in itself is important to know, right? And especially when you realize that the father basically believed that Martin had been abducted by this high-profile group of pedophiles, and this is just directly after the magistrate's son Vishal had disappeared in '81, and so it was inevitably Vishal's body was found and buried in a shallow grave. It's very sad, honestly, whenever you look at the details of the case. But again, this is, I think, just the Elm Guest House was raided just a few months after that, right? So that's the point that people need to be aware of. And so beyond that, you have other reports that were being made public on the Elm Guest House at the time, but very much being covered up by the authorities who were supposed to have been thoroughly investigating. But this is when people need to realize the chauffeur connection comes to fruition in terms of Sidney Cook and these other suspects that were being looked at throughout the course of the investigation, which all was acknowledged later on through Operation Fernbridge. As I said, decades later in 2014, this is all made public. And so you have Sidney Cook, who's this, named the head of this murderous pedophile group and of the Dirty Dozen, right? And Cook and these three other perpetrators, I believe Les Bailey, Robert Oliver, and Stephen Burrell, were all basically convicted of abduction, rape, and murder of three boys, right, during the 1980s. And ultimately, through the scope of the criminal investigation, the network itself was covered up, and that's the most crucial point people should take away from this. But this was all happening. I believe there were far more deaths that occurred within the context of this gang, and I don't think it was even just the dozen, right, that you referenced earlier, as far as like, you know, the number of children that were potentially victimized by this gang of pedophiles, I think outnumbers obviously what's been acknowledged publicly by the authorities whatsoever, and also even by the evidence revealed throughout the course of the investigation. But during an investigation into Cook and this gang that was deemed Operation Orchid, basically it was discovered that these accomplices, Lenny Smith, had been a rent boy, okay, in the West End, and thought to have been linked directly to the Elm Guest House. And so later on, essentially, this reminded me directly of the Odyssey Foundation, because when Operation Fernbridge detectives checked the original case files to see if any further links between Cook's gang and the Elm Guest House had been made, they discovered files pertaining to that aspect of Operation Orchid had mysteriously disappeared. So it seems as if you had Martin Allen's older brother, Kevin Allen, and he went on the record basically saying that they used to wash the government cars on the commissioner's residence because they were living in obviously in the caretaker's residence on the property of the commissioner's property, right? And so anyway, the fact that they used to wash this fleet of government cars, and this is all on the commissioner's residence and other surrounding buildings, I guess, under Australian embassy jurisdiction. All of this is important for people to kind of like contextualize the level of I think it was like you had the MI6 that was alleged to have participated in facilitating the cover up, but you also have basically I believe it was, I mean, you have allegations of the deputy director of the MI6 essentially being a prolific pedophile, right? Things of that nature, as well as the Home Secretary, I believe Leon Britton was mentioned in this as well. So you have so many different evidentiary implications throughout the course of this investigation, and then Operation Fernbridge publicly acknowledging all of these direct connections, and then the fact that clearly you have individual perpetrators who would really be given kind of the cover-up treatment in terms of their ultimate demise and in regard to right, just the scope of the enterprise. And whenever they're kind of like criminally convicted and things of that nature, they're never given a window, very much of a relevant window of time to kind of speak on their involvement with the network. So I think that's worth mentioning at the very least. So you have a lot of deaths in regard to the alleged perpetrators and possible suspects and things of that nature as well. But anyway, I can leave it at that.
Perfect. I enjoyed the dig. You ready to go to intermission, Austin? We'll come back. Probably talk a little bit about the migrant crisis. I do have a funny clip that we could probably tie into it of the finally just the comeuppance of the power of the people striking back against Vivek Ramaswamy. Oh, so delicious. Maybe a little Phil analysis from Austin. If you guys don't call in, or we're going to talk about the Odyssey, so call in, guys.
No, I swear.
Patrons will hang out with you guys here in a moment if you so choose. I see a good number of you guys hanging out there in the back. I like to remind you guys that so we don't feel like losers when none of them come up. They're back there. They just like to hang out in the back. But with that, let's go ahead and go into intermission. Jacob, go ahead and roll that beautiful bean footage. See you guys here in a few.
Within the last decade, Los Angeles has witnessed crime sprees by the Skid Row Stabber and the Hillside Strangler. Now police are holding two men in connection with another multiple murder investigation. This time, the target was teenage girls. David Dow reports.
In late November, police quietly arrested Lawrence Bittaker on the left and Roy Norris in connection with a kidnap-rape investigation. Now, sheriff's investigators believe at least 5 teenage girls were murdered by the 2 ex-convicts during a 4-month spree last year. The victims were all raped, tortured, and strangled, and officers believe there may yet be more victims.
I'd have to speculate, based on the information we received, that there are a number of other additional bodies.
How many do you think?
I have no way.
The sheriff says at least one of the victims was among hundreds of girls photographed by the 2 suspects on Los Angeles area streets.
These suspects have taken over 500 photographs of potential victims. They are girls in their teen ages and were considered by them as victims. We don't know which of the 500 may turn out to be actual victims.
Officers say 2 of the victims were forced into this van, abducted, and murdered. The others were last seen hitchhiking. All of the girls are believed to have been picked up along the Pacific Coast Highway in the communities of Redondo Beach and Torrance. Deputies say about 30 to 40 other teenage girls are missing from the same general area, but so far, they say, they have no evidence linking any of their disappearances to Bittaker and Norris. David Dow, CBS News, Los Angeles.
The modern age of mass murder began just over 20 years ago with the grisly discovery of the battered, bloody bodies of 8 young student nurses in their South Chicago apartment. They had been stabbed, strangled, ravaged systematically over a period of hours by this man, a monster named Richard Speck. Senseless and cold-blooded, it left the nation in shocked disbelief. But just 2 weeks later, it happened again. Charles Whitman, who after killing his wife and mother climbed the bell tower of the University of Texas, armed to the teeth. 90 minutes later, 12 people lay dead, 30 others wounded, until finally police sharpshooters brought him down. At the time, it was called the most savage one-man rampage in the history of American crime. It was still just the beginning. In what police later called the worst one-day slaughter in U.S. history, 21 men, women, and children were cut down at a McDonald's restaurant in Southern California. It was in July 1984. 15 more people were wounded. SWAT teams helped the horrified onlookers, finally killing the gunman, James Hubert. His wife later said he had left home that day with a pistol, a shotgun, and a rifle, telling her he was going hunting for humans.
The one with the red bike was the first one almost to escape, but he died first. Then the other 2 died and fell off the bike. Then when I saw them get killed, I thought I was going to get killed, so I ran to the post office.
Another human hunter, Pat Sherrill of Edmond, Oklahoma, wiped out 14 fellow postal workers before killing himself in August 1986. They called it Crazy Pat's Revenge because he had been reprimanded the day before for poor job performance.
I seen one of my friends at the floor, had blood coming out.
By causing the crash of PSA Flight 1771 last year, David Berg may have taken more lives. But when it comes to terror and violence, no killer has more notoriety than Charles Manson.
According to evidence, some of the most bizarre and heinous crimes in recent history may have been rooted there. In 1977, there was New York's Son of Sam murders. Henry Lee Lucas, perhaps the most prolific serial murderer in United States history, who claims to have murdered several hundred women over a 25-year period. The McMartin Preschool in Manhattan Beach, California, associated with child abuse. And most recently, California's so-called Night Stalker, accounting for nearly 20 deaths on the West Coast. All of these have had links to Satanism or devil worship. Sandy Gallant is a police officer with the San Francisco Police Department, and she has seen it. And Dr. Alfred Kudley is a psychiatrist who's also a consultant to the LA County Superior Court, joins us from our Burbank studios, and he has too. But Dr. Kudley, this litany of crime I've described, does that exaggerate the phenomenon, or is it bigger than we would dare expect?
Allegedly of child abuse, 6-year-old Lisa Steinberg, like no other victim before her, got this country's attention. And that's an indictment of our society. Because each year in this country, an estimated 4,000 children die of abuse or neglect. Well, tonight, we're going to tell Lisa's story in a way you haven't seen before. We'll take you to the block where she lives and inside her apartment building. We've spoken to the neighbors who tried to help and to total strangers who sensed that she was in danger. And all week, people have been asking, how did the system fail Lisa? John Stossel's report has some answers.
This is the story of a child's short life gone terribly wrong, of neighbors asking themselves, what could we have done? And of a city faced with the question, whose child was this?
All right, and we're back. And good news, guys. $5 from GitHub Enoch here. No Odyssey tax paid, so no Odyssey, no Odyssey talk. I'm sorry, Austin.
How dare you guys?
We're not gonna let that happen today.
before I forget, there's one final point that should be made that connects.
No,
Jimmy
we're
Savile.
not going to talk about the world shaking, the dramatic appearance of, I can't even think of his name. I fucked it. Elliot Page in the Odyssey. We're not going to talk about that Emmy, what should be an Emmy-winning performance. We'll see what happens when the awards come around. But go ahead, Austin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, man.
Oh, by the way, 1-833-722-DEAD. If you want to get in here and pluck away Austin's autism as well.
So there is a ridiculous sort of kind of extraordinary connection that I forgot to mention, and I might as well mention it in terms of the Elm Guest House affair, because just knowing that, the brother, right, that had been working with this private chauffeur company with the missing child as well, which, I believe it was Martin Allen who was the missing child. And then his older brother, Kevin Allen, was the one that I had mentioned that they had washed these government cars at the commissioner's residence, the high commissioner's residence. Well, it turns out basically that Kevin Allen made a personal statement to the authorities. And this is fascinating stuff, because he basically stated that there was this private chauffeur company used by the Australian High Commissioner or High Commission, and they hired stand-in drivers apparently. And so the company in question had a number of convicted pedophiles on its payroll, right? And this included, at one time, Sidney Cook, who was allegedly the ringleader of the Dirty Dozen. And so another had basically been David Smith. This is an alleged implicated perpetrator who was also being hired on occasion as a stand-in driver by this private chauffeur company that was filled with convicted pedophiles. And it turns out David Smith was the personal driver of Jimmy Savile. And yes, and so he turned out to be a convicted pedophile as well, and then died of a heroin overdose the day before his trial. So Kevin Allen, the older brother of Martin Allen, who had gone missing in the throughout the course of I believe he went missing in 79, right? If I remember correctly. So he gives a statement, the older brother, Kevin, and he when speaking to the authorities, he basically claims the Australian High Commission in London is essentially what is being implicated. Kevin says it was standard practice for the High Commission to supplement its regular drivers with stand-in and casual drivers from a particular chauffeur firm located just across the Thames. His research has revealed that this chauffeur firm had at various times employed Sidney Cook, this prolific pedophile, whose gang, the Dirty Dozen, would later be convicted and jailed for the torture and murder of 3 young boys in the 1980s. So Jimmy Savile's chauffeur, this is the legitimate statement from Kevin Allen. He says, quote, Jimmy Savile's chauffeur, David Smith, who killed himself last year before standing trial on sex charges, is believed to have had links to the same car company in the late 70s. Cook and his pedophile cohort are understood to have been some of the drivers who would pick up young care home boys and rent boys in the expensive cars and deliver them to organized orgies in Barnes, Pimlico, and Kensington. Operation Orchid files basically hadn't been the only ones that disappeared, right? And concerning this alleged VIP pedophile ring, it wasn't the only batch of files to go missing in the 80s. And so it was basically discovered that a dossier that existed, it was dossier of Geoffrey Dickens, I believe, that he handed to Leon Britton, which was implicated as a pedophile in the network. So Leon Britton was given this dossier in 1983.
The Geoffrey Dickens files?
Yeah, the Geoffrey Dickens files, for real.
That's got to be the title.
That's hilarious. That's terrible. But honestly, this just the same way that Matthew Nimitz did working for the U.S. State Department during the Odyssey Foundation criminal case and investigation, whenever the 30,000 index cards of the 100,000 plus prominent perpetrators and high profile clients within the Odyssey Foundation who were legitimate pedophiles had basically destroyed all the evidence, right? And so it turns out that in 1983, when this dossier is handed over to Leon Britton, it's basically lost or inevitably destroyed by the Home Office. No one knows, but it no longer exists. And this instantly in the 2014 Operation Fernbridge investigation, right, where all of this was basically being made public once again, with far more detail being provided, you essentially have investigations into the ring. There were all these allegations that were being made that the MI5 was directly responsible for the cover-up. And so that goes to show, here we are again, right? It's the same concept of what happened, not only with Dutroux, not only with Epstein, right? It's just not only with the finders. It's like we can point to each and every one of these cases, Franklin, Craig Spence. I mean, it's just never ending. And so we see the very same treatment being given that to the Elm Guest House affair, which has been labeled a hoax just by the official version of events in the official narrative. It's fascinating to me that this has ultimately been the conclusion of what the general public kind of believes this to have been. So fascinating.
Yeah. Now let's change gears a little bit. Move on over to the migrant crisis. I guess more kind of in line with our as above, so below sort of inversion discussion. I thought this is particularly interesting. I mean, now this is kind of like I don't know, how would we frame this? This is Vivek getting, I guess, shit on. I haven't watched this clip yet, but I've seen the caption. Seen it passed around of him getting absolutely, I guess, shit on over at the Young Americans for Liberty this year, apparently. Apparently he had the gall to say something along the lines of like, the truth of the matter is people my generation have already made it, as Vivek Ramaswamy. Although I just feel like he's kind of taken on this face of this like new... I don't know, this new wherever the establishment wants to go, like what they're trying to be slick with this new Vance move and like the teal verse and stuff. Like these aren't, they like to frame themselves as like being border or being like or border warriors or whatever, and like big on immigration. Yet, let's be real, and people know me. I've been pretty open. I'm the anarchist here. I'm not pushing any laws, but these are the guys who are saying, "Oh, we're gonna crack down the border and this and that." But what you kind of miss, what's missed, is, and it's a little bit more glaring obvious with somebody like Vivek, his bobblehead glaring back at you. It kind of tells the tale, but it's not really. That they want that they actually really want to crack down the border, or that they want to reduce immigration. It's that they want to shape immigration in a certain way, which, funny enough, is like the worst way that most people go. This when they develop some parody of what open borders will give you, they are actually, funny enough, tend to be describing the dystopia that the Viveks and Teal and all of his acolytes are actually angling for pushing. Like they are angling for, yes, some sort of form, I guess you could say, of a more restrictive border policy, but by God, will we not, those borders get porous as fuck if we're talking about H-1B Indians, won't they? So, of coming from their fucking lower caste over there, essentially their little fucking Indian goys they have over there that have, become accommodated with the goy thing, and they're okay with it and cool with it. It's like, it's literally like an underclass of slaves. A lot of people don't realize this. Like, yeah, I tease Vivek, but he's not one of them. Like, they like to act like, they have this underclass of slaves they're basically bringing in with them. But they're also, this kind of plays into something going on in Spain right now, who has earned the ire of the Zionist-occupied government. Kind of very much the same Zionist-occupied government I'm kind of describing, sort of, although this is kind of like the new hip veneer of it going forward. But Spain has been kicking back. Spain has notably been preventing the United States from using it as a launching base for some of its attacks in Iran. They've kind of cracked down on their region and, essentially sequestered themselves off from some of the empire building as of late of the United States and Israel, especially in regards to the Iran stuff. Very much kind of forging a different path so far as European nations go. And funny enough, they've recently seen a surge of immigration, and many people are jumping to the conclusion, maybe for good reason, maybe for not. I haven't really had a chance to dig into it, so I'm interested to hear what you have to say. Many people angling that this has something to do with, I guess, kind of a more extreme version of what I just described, where you get one of your brown goys to usher in a bunch of people. Obviously, the Vivek's more of the subtle version. This is going to be more of the crazy, over-the-top, weaponized brown people version.
Yeah. It seems as if this was a sort of, this was a manufactured and calculated.
I just realized I didn't even play the clip. I just set that whole clip up and I never even played it. Real quick. Okay, let's Here's the clip. I completely laid out who Vivek is, what this moment is kind of signifies, yet I didn't play the moment. Here's the moment.
The truth of the matter is, no matter what happens in whichever direction we go, people of my generation have already made it. We're going to be fine. It's going to be your generation that pays the price. That choice belongs to you.
You're a political cretin, and you need to get the fuck out of here.
That's
Oh my
awesome. He literally left to him screaming boos. That line is great. The one guy goes, "You're a political credit. You need to get the fuck out of here." That guy said it loud. He said it with his fucking chest. That was cool. He is too, though. He really is. He's a disgusting political creature. The more you dig into him, the more obvious he is. He really is just a pump and dump, nasty fucking scammer. He really is just the absolute. I try not to be racist. I really do, guys. But like, racists be doing racist stuff. I don't know what to tell you. Like, he literally is. Like, his whole life is just a Jeet scam. It just is. Like, he literally ran a pump and dump with his mom as like the expert to essentially sell the pump and dump, and that's what he made it off of. All of his fucking everything's a grift. He literally he was the first Indian to be part of the fucking Goy Jew dick sucking club in Harvard or Yale or whatever the fuck. I forget what it's called. We've talked about it before. It's like some Shabbat dinner thing. Literally a Shabbat goy. He is literally a Shabbat goy of the highest order. Like, I can't be any... they make me racist. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'm almost trying not to be. How do I say it without sounding racist? This is who this fucking man is. So, I don't know, what are your thoughts on all of this? And I guess you can also fill us in on some of the details of this Bane stuff.
Right, yeah. Well, honestly, you know... we've said so many times, these permanent establishment figures and personalities are so unimpressive. It's kind of extraordinary to witness, and I'm glad that as many people as seem to be are coming to terms with that fact. You know, and at the very least, they're kind of becoming far more aware of that fact and internalizing it and not allowing these political creatures to, at the very least, get out of jail free in terms of their public their public events and public just any sort of time that they make public statements whatsoever. They should be derided in this way and kind of just shouted out of the room, honestly, is what we should be doing to all of our these political establishment figures. So yeah, I'm proud of that in terms of just the reaction of the room, and I hope that more people start reacting that way in terms of these elected kind of unimpressive political figures and personalities.
In terms of literally every politician.
Yeah,
yes,
honestly.
and even the one you're thinking of.
Seriously, because I'm tired of people actually having, well, except for, the chosen couple of names, right? Which even the Thomas Masseys of the world, which drive me insane that people consistently fall into the traps. I understand how appealing some of the concepts are in the political verbiage, but it's just another establishment figure who is not offering a plausible enough solution that will change the establishment and the systematic structure. And you guys already know I'm not here to kind of debate the political structured establishment that is currently structured in DC, because obviously I have fallen out of any sort of delusion that of partisan politics and engaging in it, having any sort of like plausible positive solution in terms of being viable whatsoever working within the system. I think is kind of like it's a failed mission, but that's just how I view it personally, and I've said that many times in the past, but yeah, I'm kind of I'm politically jaded, right? And as I've said before, and I think you should be at this point, right? That honestly, you're kind of deceiving yourself in terms of repeating that cycle, and it will only lead to further demoralization or a further justification, which is kind of cartoonish and naive and vulnerable at this point. If you actually believe that you can kind of re-engage with the system in its current form and have a positive outcome, I think again, what you're just you've become psychologically vulnerable, and you're being preyed upon by these very deliberate and deceptive voices in DC that are there to provide you with what looks like a plausible, viable alternative solution to the current structured system, but in reality is just a way for you to waste your time intellectually, and it's intellectual masturbation in a way. It's just what are you really accomplishing? That's the point I'm really attempting to make. So you better either be intellectually like attempting to grow and evolve, or throughout the process of conducting some sort of research, into whatever is appealing to you. I just think it's important for people not to entirely waste their time in terms of engaging within the structured system as it is, and more often than not opt out. That is always my goal. And so I'm not going to be taken for that proverbial ride with the next political candidate that has been trotted out as some sort of populist candidate, right? That will provide us with that fictional fantasy alternative. Unplug from the system. Honestly, I think that's the best way you can. And they've made it impossible, but at least take the measures that are obviously available to us. But again, that's a whole nother story. I'm just kind of bogged down in the concept of how unimpressive these political personalities really are in DC, and none of them are appealing to me whatsoever at this moment. But but anyway, I think what's happening with the migrant crisis, right? This is a massive manufactured, I was calling it the massive manufactured Moroccan migrant crisis, because that's exactly what it is. It's the confessions of an economic hitman, but this is how they weaponize borders. And so if you look at kind of how this is playing out, it's almost an oversimplification in terms of acting as if the political personalities involved in this crisis, in terms of the governments involved in Morocco and Spain. I think it's naive to imagine that one's a white hat and one's a black hat. This isn't how things work, internationally speaking, within globalist politics. It's just not. The geopolitical chess match at hand, yes, they're going to punish the sovereign citizens of Spain. They're not going to punish the elected officials, right? Yes, that will effectively happen at times. But in this context, I think you have two controlled assets that are playing out their role that will effectively cause chaos and wreak havoc, and ultimately only have a direct consequence in terms of the average person and the average members of just the average citizens, obviously, within both countries is the point. And so you could look at this as this kind of again, it's a deliberate and malevolent kind of calculated attack on Spain through this immigration crisis, is what it seems like. And because it's definitely been orchestrated by this strange U.S.-Israeli pressure and the Zionist-occupied government attempting to obviously utilize this to their benefit in terms of how it seems as if there was a threat to members of the established government within Spain that has been made, in terms of much more than a threat. But the point being is that it seems as if, and people need to understand as well, that you don't have this many immigrants just spontaneously migrate to the border, especially understanding like the geography of this border, which I do think people need to understand, and how small this territory is as well. Because again, it's like, it's important for people to know just how this geopolitical conflict is being leveraged to the benefit of the establishment. And I think in terms of specifically understanding the geography, it's basically pronounced Ceuta, I believe, is how it's pronounced, if I remember correctly. It's an autonomous city of Spain, and it's located on the northern coast of Africa, right? And this is across the Strait of Gibraltar from the mainland of Spain, and it shares a land border with Morocco. Ceuta is officially Spanish territory and has been governed by Spain for basically centuries at this point. And as a result, it's also a part of the European Union. Bing, bing, bing. This is a big problem because it uses the euro as its currency. Spanish is its official language, but the EU has had a direct a role to play in terms of this crisis. Ceuta occupies a strategically important location at the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea. So once again, the geopolitical nature of how this kind of this is a peninsula, I believe, as well. At one point, is where a lot of the migrant crossing was happening, which Ceuta is essentially there's one of two Spanish autonomous cities in North Africa. Basically, is Melilla or something like that. Is I don't know. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, but it's very unique geography, and I think people need to understand that fact as well, because it's made it a very important trade hub and also migration hub, and it's caused it's major border security between Europe and Africa. So this is a huge, at the very least, it's it's vital in terms of the geographical importance. So Morocco claims sovereignty over Ceuta, arguing that the city should be part of Moroccan territory because of its location on the African continent. So the issue has remained this long-standing point of diplomatic disagreement between Morocco and Spain ever since Morocco gained independence in 1956. So that's kind of like the historical precedence of what exactly is playing out in terms of the conflict, beyond the fact that this was obviously manufactured, as I said before, by these kind of NGO constructs, right? And I read this extraordinary article that talks about how Morocco facilitated the migrant crossings into Spain. This is according to Western intelligence, which is basically claiming, which obviously we have to be very skeptical of, was claiming that North African country basically helped 60,000, Morocco helped 60,000 cross into this tiny neighboring territory of Ceuta, Spain. So Morocco allegedly facilitated the sudden influx of 60,000 migrants into the Spanish enclave. And this is essentially a repeat of some sort of punishment policy that they've engaged in the past. And this is what this is a Telegraph article that the headline is "Morocco facilitated migrant crossings into Spain," and basically you have sources going on the record claiming that the surge served as a punishment amid diplomatic frustrations with Spain specifically, and that Moroccan officials were believed to have been frustrated with Pedro Sanchez, the socialist prime minister of Spain, over his pursuit of gas deals, with rival Algeria being one specific factor involved. I think it's much more than that, because Morocco previously funneled like 8,000 people into Ceuta in 2021 following a dispute with Madrid over the sovereignty of the Western Sahara, which preceded a sudden policy change in Spain. So this is insane to me, and especially when Ceuta was basically recently overrun with all of these 60,000 plus 70,000 potentially migrants crossing, families swimming. It wasn't really families. If you look at the footage, it didn't look like families to me. But you have what have been presented as allegedly being families. Now, if you look at there's one specific. I'll pull up this Al Jazeera video because it's kind of interesting. It just shows that these people were in no way families crossing over, it seemed. And another point I saw basically someone make is that how unlikely it really is for this number of migrants to spontaneously storm the Spanish border. It just seems like there has to have been this sort of policy steering NGO organization to help with the coordination. And I think they definitely were utilizing social media to help with this level of coordination, and realizing that, and apparently the Spanish government has a very, they basically oppose the genocide, the Israeli genocide of the Palestinian people. And so that is something that they've been vocal about in terms of the Spanish government, and especially with Pedro Sanchez. But what's interesting to me is that I believe Pedro Sanchez is a controlled asset. He's pictured with Alex Soros at one point, which I think is very interesting. And you have people going on the record claiming that the EU was the main financier of this migrant invasion as well, right? I've seen Rebel News, a bunch of other kind of more independent publications going on the record, trying to claim that essentially many of these migrants were even claiming on video that they were financed directly by the European Union as far as their movements and their migration. And then you have the Red Cross basically being exposed as handing out all of this free food to thousands of these Moroccans that had invaded the Spanish shores. And so it illegally migrated is the point, right? And so if you're considering all these NGOs playing a vital role in essentially facilitating this migration and allowing these people to remain there, and then also you see what look to be military transport vehicles, man, that are just pulling up and just opening up and flooding out nothing but military-aged males, really, in my opinion, out of these massive military transport vehicles. And so it seems like this is a calculated deception in terms of the migrant crisis being organic whatsoever. And if you look at what I found to be fascinating too is what seemed to have been a threat by Itamar Ben-Gvir after the fact, right? Just as it was all happening. So essentially, I believe it's if you look at I forgot to mention the Alex Soros part with the Spain socialist leader, right? Who's really kind of, I don't know. He's very unimpressive as well in his own right. But Pedro Sanchez is his name, and essentially you have, as I mentioned before, this North African enclave in Spain, Ceuta, is basically facing one of the most. It's the largest migration, one of the largest migration surges in recent history, but in all of the history of this border crossing, which is interesting. And basically, Pedro Sanchez came out and condemned the arrival of this 60,000 plus migrants from Morocco, and he called it directly an infringement on Spain's sovereignty. And then you have Trump coming out, and he makes a statement where he's criticizing Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, over this migration situation, which essentially he says that his approach, his policy approach, has contributed to this border crisis. But you know what's interesting is that there seems to be more to that story, right? Is the main point, and important for people to be aware of, because apparently you had like some sort of chaotic change in a Spanish Supreme Court ruling that prohibits authorities from summarily returning migrants who arrive by sea without due process. And this all effectively just happened and has been alleged to have been a primary trigger for the massive influx, when in reality it seems to have been a staging mechanism to allow this crisis to transpire. Because you even had Spanish officials coming out making statements that human trafficking networks were exploiting this legal shift by spreading rumors that crossing by water now guarantees entry, and turned a manageable flow into a chaotic surge of tens of thousands. That's alleged to have been, as well as economic desperation and things of that nature, geographic proximity, and all of this being referenced as a specific, because again, it's like a very short distance. You could legitimately swim this and cross this land border. But 57 people died or something was the original quote during the breach, as there were like all these crowds that were overwhelming the border defenses. And it was like, I believe there was a military, there was an order for essentially, you know, I believe it was Pedro Sanchez basically just called it like a military crisis, essentially, and he ordered the Spanish military to respond. And so I saw footage in 2019 of basically Pedro Sanchez meeting with Alex Soros. And whenever I saw this, I saw Alex Soros praising Pedro Sanchez for granting legal status to up to 500,000 undocumented migrants in Spain. This legitimately just happened, right? And so I feel as if, because oh, hey, your buddy Nick Shirley was on the scene. I saw this. This was hilarious to me. So this dude, he's on the scene, you know, glows like the sun, the little controlled asset spook that he is. And he's out here talking to some, I'm sure, an organic and authentic Spanish citizen who's confirming that these illegal migrants are being imported for votes. That's what he's claiming. So his notion, and I don't believe this, I think this is too simple, but it could be, I think it's too oversimplified, but it definitely could be a factor in the layered agenda in regard to this migrant crisis. Because basically polls came out showing that this liberal prime minister, Pedro Sanchez, was going to potentially lose this upcoming election to the more conservative candidate. And just after this, you have this massive migrant crisis where he essentially goes through the process of granting the legal status for over 500,000 undocumented migrants at one point that got Alex Soros to even give him this sort of praise, right? Lavish him with praise. So it kind of shows that the confessions of an economic hitman playing out in this sort of way. But so that's possible, right? Just in terms of like, imagine importing votes in that way. It's definitely a possibility. I don't believe it was the main priority. And if you've been covering the poly market, the ridiculous poly market, revelation sort of thing, and it's interesting to me how much Nick Shirley references poly market. By the way, it's kind of funny, but
Sure
I saw. Do what?
I'm sure he's getting paid. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because I saw a poly market post claiming that Spain revealed roughly 70,000 of the 72,000 migrants who entered Ceuta from Morocco have now left, which seems impossible, right? And very unlikely. I would imagine impossible. But at the same time, just understanding that essentially, yes, the Spanish government and definitely the establishment figures in Spain seem to be sort of overtly against and in opposition to the Israeli genocide. So maybe they don't appreciate the kind of how verbal and vocal the administration in Spain has been in terms of opposing the Israeli government and the Israeli state at the current moment with their foreign policy.
I believe it was Spain, maybe it was France. But I believe they had threatened, I believe it was Spain. It was a collection of countries. It said something. It was I say threat, but it technically wasn't a threat. It was, we would advise them to be, with their current posture and their position in regards to anti-Semitism. They're inviting and rewarding terrorism, and I wouldn't be surprised if they ended with a problem of terrorism on their shores. And so they've already made this illusion of, let's be real, this mob shakedown veiled threat of we will send terror to your country. Essentially what they've done to all their neighbors. And
that's what Itamar Ben-Gvir basically said after this all happened. And by the way, it essentially the context of this is that Morocco is an ally, basically an ally of Israel, and directly in regard to this kind of like security alliance in a way. And they recognize Israel in every way as far as like promoting, their policies in a certain sense. And Israel, they basically recognize Morocco's claim over the Western Sahara, which is what I just mentioned to you. Ever since Morocco's independence in 1956, this has been a huge sticking point for, who the government administrator should be of this, this sovereign little. It's very strange because again, it's like I think it was only 83,000 even live here, right? 83,000 basically live in this area in Ceuta. And so it's like to even imagine that almost doubling the population of this small area just within the concept of a migrant crisis within a couple of days. It's just a kind of a fascinating, it would be a massive crisis. And beyond that, it seems to have been, Morocco's core security interests is basically a part of, who is the sovereign authority in terms of this specific region and their claim over the Western Sahara. And I believe this is where the dispute for this territory is kind of like effectively over. And so the U.S. and Israel, they gave Morocco disputed Spanish territory as early as recent as 2020. And this was basically Morocco's reward for recognizing Israel and promoting their policies and becoming involved in the security alliance and a security ally of Israel specifically. So, and I also I mentioned Itamar Ben-Gvir, and he comes out and he says, "My congratulations to the president of the government of Spain, Pedro Sanchez, for his profound commitment to welcoming my immigration and, quote, human diversity." This is a threat he's making, honestly, right? This is what you wanted. As someone who demonstrates great concern for Hamas and the residents of Gaza, I call on you to translate words into actions. Open the doors of Spain and grant refuge to the residents of Gaza who seek to immigrate. This is an excellent opportunity to contribute a little more to Spain's human diversity. So that goes to show, it's kind of tongue in cheek. Like they're overtly making this sort of statement that, we obviously kind of controlled this outcome and strategically manifested this migrant crisis in order to punish, Spain and the current regime. And I do think that's a plausible likelihood in terms of what the ultimate goal was involved here. But anyway, fascinating stuff, buddy.
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to mention that the European Union, it just has to be involved because this is so directly involved with controlling this specific territory in Spain. And so obviously you would have to think that the EU would be financing this migration in order for it to take place. And for this to be a strategic hub in the first place, of course they're going to utilize this opportunity. And it will only cause, I think, just within... you're going to have a very severe reaction in terms of the populace in that area, right? But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good. I thought that this would be a good little clip to bring it to an end. Just kind of, I don't really know entirely what you're talking about here, Austin. I don't really get where anyone's getting the feeling that anything's artificial here. But here's a protester in front of the Moroccan embassy in Madrid. So let's check this out.
No, damn.
that there was a seagull, buddy.
Wow, man.
I think they got this up covered from all different sides. I have no idea what she said, but I understood that language. Let's bring Beans in here. Let's get one of the call from one of the patrons, and then we'll get out of here.
Look at this real quick. This was the Al Jazeera video of that I just wanted to briefly play. It's very, very short. And then we can basically move on to something else. But I did think this is kind of a visual of how much of this was not at all, in my opinion, these families that were naturally migrating in some authentic, organic way.
Very happy to be here. It's been a very tough experience to go from the ocean. It was very tough. The police officers tried to stop us, but our will and our determination, we could came here.
I honestly felt like this is an actor. You know what I mean? Like when I saw his little smirk, like it's right after this. It's almost as if, oh, what was my line? Oh, I got the line. I delivered it exactly how you guys taught me to, right? The guy behind the camera will be far more aware. Maybe I'm just extraordinarily paranoid, but I legitimately do believe so much of what we see, especially from prominent publications, is just contrived pageantry that will only appeal to emotion. It's almost the Delphi method taking place in real time. Emotional appeal, I should read this. So obviously Spain deployed its military to sweep back thousands of migrants across Morocco, as we've been discussing. With at least 9 people reported dead, 57 in the latest mass crossing. Nearly 2,000 migrants have reached Ceuta in less than 2 weeks. The largest surge since 2021, as I mentioned, was the last time they were allegedly punished in this way. No, I don't see families very much. There's one woman that I saw in all of that, to be honest.
Austin, you're not showing the video right now.
Okay. Oh, for real?
Yeah, I don't know. You must have changed the slide, the presentation thing or whatever, so you don't have it up right
No, I
now.
didn't touch anything, bro.
You were showing it a second ago, and now it's not there.
It's gone bye-bye. I don't know what you did. Mess with it.
Hold on, I'll do it. Let's see.
Oh, there we
Is
go.
it back?
Yeah, it's back.
What's the last thing you saw?
I mean, it only been a couple seconds. You're good.
Okay. There's a couple families. I'll try and translate a little bit, but obviously they're acting as if this is a very sympathetic and emotional appeal. I think this specific segment from Al Jazeera, but they're basically claiming locals in Spain were sympathizing with the migrants who are risking losing their lives through the migration. It looks like they chose a specific asset to then provide us with that sentiment, who looked to have been one of those homeless crackheads from downtown LA that they paid $5 to, and they thought they were negotiating to basically give a to go vote for the mayoral election. If you remember, that's basically who they just chose out of the crowd to provide the public sentiment of how Spain feels about the migration process happening.
Viene aquí a buscarse la vida. Esto es bonito, es bonito.
A ellos les pintan en España que aquí hay futuro, que hay trabajo, y la verdad que sí, pero
believe that there's a future here, but there are jobs, and to be fair,
después cuando llegan se encuentran con la dura realidad de que no tienen nada y que después la gente los trata como si no fueran nadie.
And that people treat them as if they were nobody. So again, a massive emotional appeal. This is the Delphi method at play in terms of how you kind of emotionally trigger the members of the general public to overreact and not see clearly in terms of the inorganic and inauthentic rise of this manufactured migrant crisis is the point. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. I'm sorry about that, guys.
Oh, you're good. Beans, what's up, brother? You're on the show. You're the last. Save the best for last. What's up, Beans? What you got for us?
Appreciate you guys. On that one note, it's very odd how anytime anything like this happens, no other countries get flooded except for your, main countries that are beefing with Israel. Just weird. There's a really odd factor to it as well. Once you look at what the actual what your neocons were into, like your David Kochs that actually, developed the entire industry of flooding you with immigrants to get you cheaper rates and everything like that. That's just a tried and true process of getting immigrants in. But Jose, I'm sorry, I might keep you longer, but I wanted to dive back into what we were talking about before with the child sex rings when we were getting into, you mentioned a whole lot of stuff. I know, Jose, you got to get out of here, so I don't want to keep you
I'm
too
good.
long,
This is one of the rare times I got a little extra time to burn.
Okay.
Austin, that was not permission to do 45 minutes, though.
Jose, I got to tell you, I was looking for permission, bro.
It's still late. I may not have, but I'm still going. My eyes are still going to feel heavy. I don't have to get in bed as early. It's still late, though.
It is late. I'm in Florida, too. I don't know if you're voting for Fishback or Byron Donald, but
no. I'm not.
I know. I've opted out. Don't worry.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. So I was wondering mostly, you dive back into these whole rings, and the furthest back that I can get to an individual area where these whole things happen typically is North Fox Island. Anything before that, there's not a whole lot of stuff going on, and you get back to North Fox Island. And it's the beginning of protecting the wealthy versus, the normal plebeian or whatever. And you deal with Francis Sheldon.
Mm-hmm.
He disappears. And recently I was looking back into it, and I don't know why, but I decided to go on Google Maps, and I was looking at North Fox Island. Well, they opened up the the airstrip at North Fox Island. In October, it'll be 14 years ago.
Right.
So you're flying your children out there to go and camp on North Fox Island, and that kind of fucked me up. And then I came across a comment on Google Maps to say, go look at South Fox Island. And I don't know what's going on there, but there's these weird comments on there where it's the same thing. It's like, oh, the pancake was phenomenal, and you tossed the Smurfs in the volcano. It was just really weird comments. I'm like, I don't know if anything's still going on out there, and it's
Right.
obviously just a weird thing. But as far as North Fox goes, it seemed like the beginning of where everything started. And it seemed like the beginning of where it was like a pressure valve to find out, like, hey, what can we kind of get away with? We tested these people in Michigan. We tested these people in Detroit. We tested these families. And now we're at a point where there's these pressure release valves like a Tucker Carlson, where it's like, oh, yeah, Epstein comes out. You have millions of people that are worried. And it's not like a Tea Party versus a 1% type thing anymore.
Right.
Now it's everybody's on the same page. So we release the pressure by saying, hey, here's this guy that seems like he's exactly like you. And we're going to kind of just like ease the pressure away because somebody really famous feels the way that you feel. And then you go through Dutroux. And I think they learned a lot from Dutroux. And I think that they applied that to Epstein. And I just kind of wanted to ask you guys, like, I don't even know how to phrase it, but like, where does this go? Like, we're at a point where an entire country has been victimized by these child sex trafficking rings, not just by Epstein, but for the last, 55 years or so. Right. And we're at a point where nobody's ever risen up. Like, at least you had in the Dutroux affair where an entire country rose up for a moment. Michelle Nihul kind of shut it down. But at least there was a moment, kind of like the 1% Tea Party movement. Right. We never had that in America for children. And now you have this other area where, and this is kind of directly related to the Tucker Martyr Made podcast that just came out today. But it's like we killed children to start the Iran war and forget about just killing children. But it's a horrible thing. That should be a horrible offense on its own. But we just had an entire sex pest ring, just nothing. People will go out for George Floyd, but they won't go out for this.
Right.
It's manufactured. So I kind of wanted to see where do you see this going? I mean, is there any hope? Is there anything that comes from this, or?
I'll jump in first. I will say, and this is actually something I was reflecting on recently, and it was like something I was thinking of because we had Nick Bryan on the show forever ago, me and Austin, and I remember we were talking about him a similar sort of question, and this was like very early. I don't think there was any Epstein files really or anything like that yet. And I remember saying something to him along those lines of kind of like the idea of like what we can hope for justice. And I made a point, and I still stand by that point, but I think there's something to what Nick added to it too. But the idea of that, like, it's kind of this like seen and unseen, and like, so, these certain, like, when you have these big bads that they're able to manipulate circumstances where they're able to get off scot-free. We end up with these circumstances where people may become aware, but people are able to escape actual literal justice. And it's kind of like, what are we doing here? And I think to some degree, I mean, you may not always get the justice that you want, but it may be a step in the right direction. And so there's still maybe some sort of, so I think there still is value. A lot of people will kind of almost get doomerish and be like, what are we even doing here? Like, if no one even really, pays any sort of actual price for this. I mean, there might be some prices actually being paid that you might not see, but I still think there is value even if no one pays an actual literal price, because this is this unseen. This then makes people aware. From then people then, apply precautions in their life. Maybe certain people have to operate in different ways. It's just this unseen thing. So I do think it's better. It's definitely still good, and that is in of itself a positive benefit. It is hard because we always like to see like a literal thing. We like to act like there's something being done, and if you're not seeing that thing being done, it's hard to convince yourself that good things are happening. But I will say, reflecting back on that, we've actually had way more. Maybe justice is the wrong word, but I guess sort of justice than even I anticipated at the time. So we've had more. So a lot of this is to some degree about perspective. Like, yes, we'd all love, there to be justice for all of these things, but this is just kind of how the world works. But I'm actually really astounded how much we have gone, and hopefully that continues going that way. And this is kind of something I'm not entirely sure. I've definitely made jokes and made said things along the lines of kind of like how Belgium, they kind of gave them ups for actually going harder in the paint than we did for the horrors of their of the Dutroux files. But in some regards, I actually think it's preferable how the United States has reacted. Without getting like into the weeds, but generally speaking, because I know the Belgium stuff got a whole lot more raucous, a whole lot more rowdy, but at least from my perspective, it actually looks like there's probably going to be a closer approximation to something resembling some sort of thing, if you squint, approaching justice as opposed to the Dutroux thing. Like the Dutroux thing, basically nobody. I mean, yeah, Dutroux got thrown and got locked up, but I mean, he had got hit from some pretty horrid stuff, and he was basically a low life nobody, basically in regards to the larger chain. So, but I don't know. I guess it's really just a matter of perspective, and I guess even just reflecting back on that interview with Nick on that, it is just kind of interesting that like how much more than even we expected has actually come. Like hell, even like the seen and the unseen. And we recently said the death of Daniel Said, who was one of Epstein's guys. Who just, kind of suspicious death. And, like, obviously that's not the sort of justice we'd like. That's them taking care of their own justice. But that's a justice of sorts. That's a warning, at least to some people out there, of the errors of that career field. That's going to steer people away from it. I know it's done by their own hands, and it is in the efforts of mitigating any sort of effects of truth coming out. But, I mean, hey, I don't know. It's all about perspective, I guess. And at the end of the day, I do think we've actually gone a whole lot more than even I anticipated. But even then, obviously, more is better. But I don't know if you got something to add, Beans or Austin, you can jump in.
Just one thing real quick. I 100% agree with you. I mean, like, if you look at from where we started at with, again, like the earliest thing that I can even think of is like North Fox Island. Obviously, there was like, the Odyssey Foundation and all these different things that happened kind of before North Fox Island, but that was like the first thing that was like a physical point that you could point to versus like a metaphorical, hey, there's magazines going around, whatever. It was like a physical thing. From that point moving forward, everything has consistently gotten better. Where you look at like, at least Craig Spence went down. Larry still out there doing his thing, kind of bothers me, whatever. But at least like as the years go on over the last 50 years, you get more and more intel and you get more and more information. I agree with you. It's better. I'm not saying it's perfect, but we're moving in it. We're trending in the right direction. But as far as Epstein goes, I still have a problem with like, I look at, people talk about the Rothschild connection now, and it's like, why is Les Wexner going out? Or I think was it Bill that was saying that the Rothschild connection was there as well, and they were both spitting
he
it
was
out.
closer to Ghislaine because of the Rothschild connection.
Right.
And basically, everybody of significance has said they were connected to the Rothschilds. It seems at this point. Wexner said it too. Like everyone said it. But go on.
But it was only to that one. Was it Aaron de Rothschild? Whoever it was. It was only to her. And to me, I'm like, okay, well, the heir to the Rothschilds, Aaron, whatever it is, the Rothschild. to me, it's like I look at that and I go, well, why are they all bringing up her, and why is that the only name that's like not blacked out in the thing? And I'm like, well, the patriarch of the family just died. There's got to be a vying for position in the family between the whole family because the patriarch just died. Maybe this is like some weird push to try and like make a move within the family. I don't know. But it feels processed. Like it doesn't feel natural. Whereas like when you look at what Nick uncovered with the Franklin scandal, that seemed really natural. You look at even with North Fox Island, you know, Francis Sheldon gets found out. Yeah, he got away. He didn't do anything. He gets found out in India years later with a child on his lap. It's a weird thing, but at least he was like pinpointed. Whereas now we're getting all these documents that are completely blacked out. We're not allowed to know anything, but for some reason, certain names are popping up, and certain names are still hidden. And you have JD Vance still hiding these names, and it's like it feels coordinated, but it is, to your point, Jose, it is still more. It's still more than we've ever got. You know, that's all.
Is it though, or are we just living
don't
through
know.
it, man? You know, I think there's a difference. We're living
It might
through
be a
this.
TV
We're
show.
not looking back in history and reflecting on a time that we weren't a part of. And so honestly, I just think, look, I am in no way optimistic in terms of this pedophile occupied government. I mean, my God, you bring up North Fox Island, instantly it's Oakland County child killers. It's Brother Paul's Children Mission. I mean, this is just like, I mean, when you realize the depth of the depravity, right? This is why I think that whenever I did my Detroit episode, I felt like we got a legitimate window and like an evidentiary window of credibility into this sort of ultimate system framework and the way in which this playbook is exploited in terms of intentionally punishing the victims and protecting the predators and facilitating the cover-ups and destroying the evidence. And the very same thing is happening with the Epstein files in real time, and yet we can do nothing about it. So how has anything changed? And yet it's more overtly in our faces in terms of we're all aware of it, and still there's nothing we can do. So at this point, I think we all just need to come to this is what I felt personally was, honestly, the level of deception that they've legitimately leveraged against us to disguise the true dynamics of power within the construct of these enterprises and these various child exploitation networks. You also have to ultimately just kind of look yourself in the mirror and think, because I really don't view, now personally, obviously we can't engage in any sort of like individual sovereignty. We're not really free citizens, in my opinion, right? And so at the same time, it's like liberty doesn't truly exist, because what freedom are we to find if we are truly just enslaved under these chains of human trafficking? I think is how we should look at it, right? Because there's no way around the fact that this is being facilitated, covered up, and legitimately under our very noses in real time. It's in no way even taking root in terms of people prioritizing what matters most, right? No, they'll actually just consistently, like I see people that I know and love that are more concerned with enforcing their political ideology upon their neighbor rather than considering the reality of the formidable threat we truly face with our own common enemy, which is this fucking pedophile occupied government, this political establishment that we cannot seem to hold accountable whatsoever, no matter what we do. And so how long can we stand idly by while the true intentions of our ruling class are beyond the veil of public scrutiny? It's impossible, right? For us to honestly, when we look at all of these examples and it becomes overtly obvious that it's just never ending in terms of these examples of the deliberate demise of our social ethics, they have gone through a process of intentionally unraveling the very moral fabric of modern society, while placing us on what I view as a very pernicious path to complete and total societal collapse. So what I don't know about having some sort of, like, my fundamental hope and inspiration comes with the level of individual sovereignty I can exercise on a daily basis around the people I love, and hopefully have a positive effect on them and the people I come into contact with, as much as I try and kind of isolate from the outside world, because I can't imagine having a good faith conversation with the average person, because they seem almost sort of as if it's an impossibility.
Blind.
Yeah, it's a foreign concept. It's nothing that they've ever really even engaged in.
Yeah.
It's subjective intellectual thought, and anyway, I just I'm not at all selling a black pill. You guys know this. That's not how I feel. I just think the beauty of life is in the relationships that we can cultivate, and these conversations that we can have, and that intellectual growth process.
Yeah.
And so thank God for that opportunity, and thank God for us to be able to, in our own way, hold power accountable by speaking the truth as much as we can possibly do it. And that is my goal. Hopefully I can introduce people to these concepts that will only, provide them with that moral foundation necessary.
Make you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
and I'm sorry, Austin, I just wanted to say, I totally agree. I'll talk to you in the post show. Jose, you look like you're about to go to bed. I appreciate your time, guys. Thank you so much. I have more to add to it, but we'll talk after. And thank you guys so much for having me every week, or however often. But
no problem. Appreciate your time, brother. We'll see you here in a few. Although I did want to kind of thread together what you were saying, Austin, there. I think there is something to kind of what you're saying, focusing on what you can change, focusing on those things around you. And obviously, we say that, me and you, while also being very interested in these things and also hoping that things change in regard to those things and hoping for better things. But at the same time, if you do keep that in mind while also having a healthy view of what it is, I know there are real lives and real things happening here, but let's be real. Like, for me, at least, I don't know about you, Austin, but it's definitely far closer to something along the lines of a hobby. Now, it's a hobby I genuinely do like, maybe closer, maybe even somewhat of a job in some regards, because I do make some money off this, but, like, I like the idea. It's not my number one priority. If a podcast doesn't do well, this in no way is, like, affects my, like, something necessarily innate to me. Like, it's like I had a bad day. If there's another child trafficking ring, I'm going to cover it, and I hope there's less of them, but it's not going to destroy my day. At the end of the day, it's going to be the interactions with my children, those around me. It's stuff like that that's going to matter. And so these are the things also you can see improvements much more readily, so you will find yourself losing your mind. So, like, obviously, while we do talk about these things and we hope these things get better, we're not at all saying we don't want them to get better, but, focusing on these things that we know are probably not going to get better is just a way to drive yourself insane. But obviously, we're incredibly interested in these things, but it is a balancing act to have a healthy outlook on it all. But, Austin, plugs, and then whatever final thoughts you have there.
Oh, yeah, brother. Yeah, I agree, man, wholeheartedly. And I just don't allow the demoralization to take root, to legitimately destroy your well-being. And honestly, it's a difficult task, because it is just extraordinarily demoralizing as you're overexposed to this detailed evidence. But if we're truly on the path to, I'm honestly asking the questions. Like, I have no idea how we finally expose and eradicate these sort of depraved patterns of behavior that really inherently perpetuate the very form of the sinister, sadistic form of abuse that we discuss so very often in these unfortunate, detailed, evidentiary, contextualized formats. It's like being granted a window into that credible line of evidence is only going to help reinforce the realistic power paradigm that exists in the current moment. And that's the only way that you can effectively not waste your time by let's just say engaging in nonsensical again, just sort of intellectual what inevitably becomes a dead end, right? And it sort of only allows you to re-engage within this current structured system. And in no way are you actually pursuing some sort of alternative solution that will reforge the structured system as it is currently in the moment today. So yeah, just don't fall for that kind of lower frequency, low hanging fruit attempt to pull you and draw you back in and seduce you back into that permanent establishment system that they hope for you to facilitate. And it will only, unfortunately, facilitate the most self-defeating interests you could imagine and policies you could ever imagine. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. But you guys, you know how much I appreciate you all showing up every week, and beyond that, just engaging with our content whatsoever. It means the world to me, and I have nothing but love for all of you. And Jose, I love you too, brother. I'm excited, honestly, to try and get to see you this weekend. So anytime, and by the way, anyone who is going to Orlando this weekend, let me know, hit me up. I'd love to, obviously, to meet as much to you as possible, because I think that's also something that inspires me and kind of moves me forward. It drives me forward, because I realize I started this so I wouldn't feel as alone. I have felt like a misfit alien my entire life, no matter where I go. And that doesn't mean that I haven't had success with social interaction or whatever the case may be, right? Like, it's just the fact of the matter is, like, I have always fundamentally, intellectually, and ideologically felt like an outcast. And so the moment that I can actually kind of re-engage with the world and find myself in an environment surrounded by people who are much more like-minded, it's something that I will never take for granted. And I'm so very grateful for that opportunity. So I hope to see you guys and meet you guys and have just a genuine conversation if it's possible. And beyond that, you guys know to follow me at the Underclass Podcast. Me, Sam, and Brad have actually taken like a brief hiatus just while Sam's doing his little vacation thing and taking a little time off, which he deserves, if anyone does. And so we'll be getting back after whatever this is here very soon. It won't be too much longer, I would imagine. And beyond that, support me. Best place, the Patreon, patreon.com/the Underclass Podcast. And yeah, I'll be I'll try and make an announcement on the Patreon as well soon before I leave. I should be flying out like a red eye on Thursday, so it's going to be an interesting travel experience, I would imagine. Hopefully I don't get sick this time, because last time I contracted the Bro Grove AIDS. So anyway, nothing but love, you guys. I love you, Jose.
Love you too, brother. For those who want to support what I'm doing, leave a like, share, subscribe, comment, leave a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify. You can find the show on YouTube, Rumble, all the major audio podcatchers, and Twitter as well. On Twitter, that's at Tower Gang Jose. Everywhere else, it's the No Way Jose podcast. If you want to support the show the best way you can do that with money over at patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. Lowest level's $2. You get access to early episodes. I do about 1 to 2 of those per week. Keep about 3 to 4 of them behind the paywall at a given time. Give you guys access to ad-free RSS feed, the Telegram, and the pre-show, post-show, and video calls on this show right here, Already Dead, which goes out on Tuesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. Also, give a big shout out to the highest level. My Patreon is a big thank you for their support, and my previous co and Tower Gang at Learn Toad, at Abrogate D's, at ZWRCK, at _ Zeal, Tim Tuttle, at John Klebold, a big fan of the show, Torn May, at Wayne Taggis, One Haircut for Kids, No Free Lunch, Jack, Mark Vestibule, Jacob Wintergrad of the Biblical Anarchy Podcast, and John Black, you beautiful bastard, who I'm going to go see here in a couple moments. But with that, guys, we're going to see some of you non-poors over here in the post show. Looking forward to hanging out with you guys. We'll see you guys in the next one. Love you all. Bye-bye.